Yeah, that was motorcade ops back then. It was like kill or be killed kind of shit. And like the one day they penetrate your motorcade and it's a feeler, then the next day you're glued to a dashboard, melted, you know. The deployment was one you can read about in international news these days, or at least that's what it became back then. It's history now, so I can speak a little bit more about it, but I was involved in the whole Nissour Square incident that those guys brought up on charges. They weren't the guys that were actually charged with crimes weren't on my team. They were on my sister team, and I was on the other team, which we were right up in it as well.
Could you summarize that briefly? Because I'm actually not familiar with the specifics of it.
That was the one where so. From an insider perspective, I'll tell you the international story version first, okay? The international story version, or at least the broad strokes, was a bunch of contractors went into a traffic circle and shot a bunch of unarmed civilians, and that's how it went. And those unarmed civilians kind of like rose up and caused an issue there, and then the rest is kind of like international court news and all that. And 4 guys eventually got charged and did prison time. They actually just recently did a podcast with what's the gentleman's name? He runs the podcast Vigilant Elite. And he's an ex-Navy SEAL, CIA contractor, and he has a lot of guys from like our walk of life, like SEALs, special operations.
I'm not sure, but I'll make a note to check it out. Vigilant Elite.
Yeah, he just popped up like a year or two ago, and his podcast just took off.
Wow.
And he just interviews formerly professional guys, or that might still be in the lifestyle, and asks them like about these things that we read about over the last 20 years of war, right? And so this incident was in September of 2007, okay? And from an insider perspective, the way it looked like for me on that day was we were staged at a checkpoint, which was kind of per the usual. And oftentimes we would parallel teams. We were a proactive response team. We were a quick reactionary force. So we responded to any incidents around the Baghdad AO that involved allied assets. So it could be, we rescued a Polish ambassador once, pretty much anyone that worked for the quote unquote good guys, right? Yeah. We know how that story has played out over the years, right? So, that was our charge. And we were standing by it at a checkpoint when one of our teams that was on venue, now this is a high threat protection team. They run around with the Suburbans and the lights, right? And they escort dignitaries and diplomats to meetings and these things in a high threat environment, right? So these people were on venue with a senior aide to Condoleezza Rice, okay, and that venue was attacked with a VBID, so a vehicular explosive device, and it was rather a large one, and they couldn't quite get through the entrance. They got a little bit past the checkpoint, and they realized they weren't going to get any farther, and they clacked it off. And so the whole checkpoint was eradicated. A lot of the entry and gate guards were killed. It was like just under probably like 1,000 pounds, I think, or something like that. So that's a lot in a vehicle.
And this was the checkpoint outside the venue where Condoleezza Rice's senior aide was inside at the time. So they're trying to get as close as possible to that building.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep. And what happened on venue was there was just minor injuries. Our team was all fine. There was cuts and bruises and stuff. She was showered in glass and like had minor cuts and scrapes and stuff like that. But as soon as that incident happened, we get the call, like, go out, and we're not driving Suburbans. We're driving massive armored vehicles with 2 crew-served machine guns in 2 turrets on each vehicle. So we have like a 4-vehicle motorcade. That's 8 crew-serves on 4 trucks,
Jeez.
And then guys inside, and like usually a designated defensive marksman team. That was my job, like a counter snipers.
Yeah. So you're rolling in hard as fuck. Everything.
We're the fucking sledgehammer. You know what I mean? Until like RPGs and mortars and things come out that could kind of neutralize that. But and that shit did happen. But on that day, so we roll out to the intersection that or through the intersection that the entire incident happened. But her venue or their venue was, I don't know, maybe like a quarter, a half mile past that. So we roll in to get them. We got them out. We enveloped them in our motorcade. As we're peeling back towards the green zone, that's where we're stationed out of, and that's where we lived and ran almost all ops out of. We were heading back to the green zone. We let their motorcade go back in the gate as we peeled off again, because as we were coming up on that ramp, basically inbound into the green zone, we got the call that another team had come out, because we work in tandem with other teams too, right? Another team had went into the intersection and just started receiving fire, and they lost the truck. So their truck went down, and so we're like, fuck, they're in it. We need to go rescue them off the X now and recover their vehicle, right? So we go drop the motorcade off with the principal and everybody else that was involved on the actual V-bin incident. We peel off to go back into the intersection we just cleared on the way to her. And as we're coming into it, we don't get the call that they self-recovered the vehicle and leave.
So the other team had already left, and that would have been important information.
But we didn't get that call.
Okay.
But before they left, there was like a massive firefight, right? Like they received fire, their vehicles down, they're returning fire, their bodies, there's hooked vehicles, there's burning shit. And we roll into this apocalypse scene. Like, where the fuck are they?
Yeah.
And our vehicles are the same makeup as their vehicles.
So they think the same guys are back. And I just want to pause you for a sec. So the guys that are firing against you, is this a terrorist group? Is this civilians that picked up weapons, or a combination? Like,
it's a gray area.
A gray area. Okay.
Yeah. It was definitely right next to an Iraqi army barracks.
Okay.
So there was at least like a battalion of Iraqi army soldiers that were directly next to the intersection. And they all joined the situation.
Okay.
But a lot of the people, some of the people that were killed were civilians in the intersection. You know, there was civilian deaths. I don't exactly know how that went. I wasn't there during that incident. But as we rolled in, we're trying to like mediate with these people and like, hey, what's going on? Where's our team? What's going on with you guys? Why are these people, you know? And they're starting to chant and go crazy, right? And there's hundreds of people, and they're starting to box us all in, right? And all that. So that was the scene of me leaving for Thailand. Like they locked me down in my room for like a week as they investigated this and shit. And then like after a week of that, I was like, I'm fucking out of here.
And internationally, that got painted with the very broad brushstrokes of, you know, contractors killed civilians or something like that.
Well, they started approaching it. I mean, they literally, from my perspective and how I studied it way back then, and I'm a little out of school on the whole incident now, except my vantage point from it. But it's like they started to prosecute it as some sort of a criminal thing in a normal place. But it's hard to do that because it's like even our ROEs were different. It's like if somebody cuts your motorcade in half, you have the right to shoot them. They don't have to go boom.
It's a direct threat to their life and safety. Yeah,
that was motorcade ops back then. It was like kill or be killed kind of shit. And like the one day they penetrate your motorcade and it's a feeler, then the next day you're glued to a dashboard, melted, you know, and that's just how it went. And then they put that through the lens of like, oh, well, why is this happening? Why are you guys shooting this, that, and the other? And so it was also, I do think it was very politically charged back then too. You know, this is 2007. This is right after the, what was like, is that before or after? Yeah, that was right after the Battle of Baghdad. And so they're trying to like, you know, there was a lot of political meandering up in that scene. But I left Iraq off contract right after that, and I moved to Thailand for the first time. So, you know, I wanted to tell that story, just caveating it, all the chaos that I was involved in, right?
Yeah, like, you go from this just completely balls to the wall, chaotic mindset. You're coming off, you know, an insane firefight situation, and then you're coming into Thailand as kind of like a reprieve from those elements. Just be like, let me get the fuck away from there and go here for a period of time.
It took years to not to defrag my hard drive. Me and my buddy would call it ceiling fright, where I would wake up most mornings, almost every morning for years and years and years, and I had no idea where I was. And sometimes this would last for like, you know, the typical period was like 30 seconds to like 4 minutes or 2, 3, 4 minutes. But it's lasted before like 10, 15 minutes. I'd be walking around like a place I lived or staying or a hotel, and I have no fucking idea where I am. I don't know what country I'm in. I'm like looking for clues, like some sort of amnesiac, you know?
And that could be you waking up in a place you've been staying at for 6 months. You wake up and you're like, where the fuck am I right now?
It was such a trip, man. Because we would deploy on schedules of 3 months to 2 months to sometimes 35 days working or 6 months on. And then you go on leave for 2 weeks or a month. And it was literally like, I'm in this intersection 1 minute, and we're firing, we're shooting guns, we're defending for our life and all this stuff. And then like within 36 hours, I'm like in a go-go bar in somewhere in like, you know, like Chiang Mai or in Jomtien or something like that.
And your brain has to comprehend all of that. And you're going into a dream state, regaining consciousness. I can only imagine what it's like to have all those different elements of psychologic chaos and physical chaos and violence crazy. And, you know, being in life-threatening situations on a regular basis to where you're desensitized, and then you get all of that taken away from you. I imagine there's, you know, you'll get into it, but just being in that space and just being like, fuck, like, where did all this stimulation go? Like, this is insane.
And it was a very professional lifestyle, like on the job. So, like I drank in the early days of my contracting career. But then I realized quick that like that's probably not the recipe for success for me. Like, 'cause I had a drinking problem as well. So I had eventually kicked that out of my professionalism. So I would not drink on contract. So for like 2, 3, 4 months or whatever the contract entailed for that stint, I wouldn't drink. And then the gloves come off because I'm going on leave, right? And that was the energy we were in, right? Like,
then the battle of the bottle.
Yeah, and it's like this violence, bro. Yeah. It's just like constantly violence and constantly professionalism and surviving and all this, and then you're free and you're like a chimp out of a cage, you know, like you're like an angry chimpanzee, and now we were in Thailand. The group of guys I was with most often, we were genuinely like good-hearted people, and we like to have fun and just relax and stuff like that. But we were also coming from a place where like once you cross that line, like we're happy to cross that line with you. And it's, you know, we're gonna fucking take care of it. You know what I mean? So maybe sometimes, well, not maybe, definitely sometimes we were a little too quick to cross that line, where when I worked in the bar later on as like a bouncer in security, I was, you know, I realized the route to success was like de-escalation, no matter how close we thought we were to that line. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, man, like we can figure this out a different way. That was not my time in Thailand, you know? So it's like we'd work out, we'd train, we'd party, and like it's patio. Like it's a fucking circus to begin with, and like there's just so many opportunities to just fucking whoop people and get into situations and shit like that, you know.